Da dee 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 da and da dee da da dee da dee da dee da dee da dee da dee da da dee da dee da da dee da da. Good morning. I hope everybody's well. I'm using a little bit different camera and lighting setup today. We'll see if it works. And if not, you'll let me know and we'll change it up. Hope everybody had wonderful holidays. Today, we're going to be learning the Sfas Emes on Parshas Bereishis, on the first opening and critically important Parsha. And then also, still working on this angle here, so my apologies. And also I'm going to provide, and it's a Torah I've taught over before, maybe a couple of years ago, it's been a little while. How do we bring the holidays, how do we transition from this incredible period of the high holidays into the rest of the year? So how do we start the year now that we finished the holidays? It's a very hard transition. And I'll explain what I mean a little bit more. If you're listening on a podcast, we welcome you. If you're watching YouTube, we welcome you. And always, I'm curious about your comments and your questions. Please always feel free to reach out. We'll try to get to them. And let's just get into it right now, okay? So the Sfas Emes starts with the quote from the Chumash, "Vayishlchu Hashem migan Eden." Famously, right, in the Adam and Eve, or Adam and Chava, are sent out of the garden. Why? Because they messed up. And it's such an amazing reading on these words. So what is the word Vayishlechuhu? He looks at the root of the word. He says, Shaliach, hu lashon shlichus. Like when a person is sent as an ambassador, or in Chassidic terms, when a Rabbi sends off a follower that they should spread the teachings and the ideas of that movement. So they're called a shaliach. And actually anybody who does anything on behalf of somebody else could be called a shaliach. And it says in the Gemara in Kedushin, right? Shaliach shel adam kamoso, a person who you send to do something is also has a connection to the person who's sending. So rather than look at this in fully negative terms, which is our customary way of looking at the Jewish people, at Adam and Chava being sent out of the Garden of Eden, the Sfas Emes, Gan Eden, Sfas Emes says it's shlichus. They were sent out, but the word, if you look in English, you'll see maybe they use the word expelled. But you would never call an ambassador somebody who's being expelled from their country. They're not being expelled. They're being sent on a mission. Well, what's the mission that Adam and Chava are being sent to? Gam begat Eden ksiv. So in the Garden of Eden, in Gan Eden, it is written that Adam and Chava were put there la'avda l'shamro, to work the garden and to guard the garden. And he says that, this is based on a Zohar, that la'avda l'shamra, what we normally understand is to work and to guard, are referring to mitzvahs aseh v'lois aseh, are referring to the mitzvos that we have, that they were given, of the mitzvahs aseh, mitzvahs lois aseh, right? The positive mitzvah and a refraining mitzvah. When we call them negative mitzvahs, I really try to, and I'm going to try this year to really refrain from saying that, because lois aseh doesn't mean a negative. There's nothing negative about it. It's all good. It's a mitzvah of refraining, something that we do not do, and something that we do. So back to the text of Alhiba Bechinas ben Lechavtz beginning Lemalka Primis Torah Mitzvah Dichsi. Okay, what's going on? So first thing is Adam and Chava and Gan Eden were given mitzvahs aseh, mitzvahs loiseh. We're going to not try to understand what that means right now, of positive and refraining commandment. But we also know that Gan Eden is another concept, not just Garden of Eden of old, but also it refers to the depths and the mysteries and the ultimate, wisdom of Torah. And he brings forward this part, another passage from the Zohar, which talks about the difference between a servant and a son who are in the king's palace. And there's a part of the palace which is where the king keeps all of his most treasured possessions. And in order to enter that area, you need some permission, right? Not everybody can just go there. You need to have some reshus, some permission, unless you're the prince, unless you're the king's son, you can go anywhere you want. So he uses this passage from the Zohar to talk about one of the things that we are sent to do in this world is to search out and find and have access to these deep treasures of Torah, to be able to look the pnimius of Torah and of the mitzvahs and of the commandments, not just to engage with Torah and mitzvahs on a simple level, but to see the real depths and the treasures that they have in them. Now, then it says, Vaikach Esa Adam, and he took Esa Adam, the man, who lushed devekis. Now, also, this is another expression. He says, what does it mean that God took Adam? The word Vaikach is an attachment. It's chibur. It's not that like I take an apple and then I let go of an apple. Rather, it's Vaikach is a way of expressing that we are being attached, connected. And in the same way, when the Jewish people, when Adam and Chava were sent out of the garden, it says, Vayirgash Adam. They were cast, we say in English, cast out. But Vigaresh is like the same, almost like the same word as Shetnasan lo Garish Aisha, that they were given a divorce. So now let's unpack this. Adam and Chava, they are in the Garden of Eden. They are charged with mitzvahs loisase. They transgress mitzvahs loisase. Don't eat, they ate. They are cast out of the garden, but they're not cast out like you throw a guy off a ship. Rather, Adam and Chava had this extremely close relationship with God, and at this point, Vayigarish, they're getting divorced from God. They're being given a get. That's it. We're done. The get is a final document which separates the husband and the wife. They're no longer connected on that level. Obviously, they may be they retain certain connections, but they're not connected on that level, that closeness, that chibuk, that the close connection of husband and wife. Now, all is not lost. And then they're sent out, and they have their shlichus to do still. But now they're going to be doing it. They have to work the land, and it says bechinas eved, right? In other words, eved is like a slave or a servant, but in other words, they are they can't get out of this state of having to work for a living, right? Eved here, it means slave, it means servant, but it refers to a person whose position cannot be changed or altered. This is the state of things, right? Unless the person who's the master, unless something changes externally, it's a stasis. So now, later on, what happens is that it says we return to a relationship with God, not in that relationship as an eved, as in this same unchanging way, but rather as like children. When we got the Torah, and that we got the Torah at the merit of our holy ancestors and of Moshe Rabbeinu, who were able to repair the Chet Adam Rishon, who were able to repair this tear in the fabric of the universe that's happened when Adam and Chava transgressed the words of God. And so when the Jewish people got the Torah, we were transformed from this stasis, from this position of being in a lowly servitude as an eved, but we were raised to the status of children. The Torah transformed our relationship to what? When were we banim before? We were banim before the Chet. We were banim before the Chet. We were children of God before being cast off, being divorced, being sent out of Gan Eden. Now, Val Zenemar Eved Maskilim Shul B'Bein Mebish Adam Rishon Mebaish is Kol Olam Shevi Meisel Olam. So we know that one of the things that also happened when Adam and Chava were sent out was it also brought Misa. It also brought death to the world. One of the ways that they were Bayish is Kol Olam. One of the ways that they I don't like the word messed up. One of the ways that they brought challenges to our world was they brought death to the world. Before Adam and Chava were cast out, they were going to live for eternity. There wasn't going to be any death. Now there was. So we also see that the importance of Avraham. So Avraham is referred to as my servant. But he also was transformed into this status of Ben. And more than that, it seems, according to the Midrash, that he was elevated to a level higher than Adam Arishon, Adam Agadol Benikas, because it says in reference to Avraham that he was Adam Agadol Benikim. He was a giant among giants, and this wasn't referring to his stature. It says the Midrash, Shaya Avraham Avinu Alav Shalom Gadol Adam Rishon. He was greater than Adam Rishon, than the first Adam. Ubavadei Mashe Hanir Chadash Baruch Hu as Adam began Eden Achar Kach Girshu. And Adam Rishon was first placed in the garden, and then he was divorced from the garden. Mishum Shahayu Kloilin Zelzer Israel Shem Bnei Olam Haba began Eden. Mitzad Taruvas Arishayim Ayuvenu. Okay, so Avram Avinu achieved this higher level than Adam Harishon. And what does that have to do with this transformation and this idea that the Sfas Emes is trying to get across? Let's see if I can unpack it a little bit. There was a fundamental transformation of humanity's relationship with God, which began with Avraham and Sarah. Right? Once there was that realization in humanity that there are not, that little idols don't have any power, and this whole concept of Avodah Zarah, everything that was going on in the world, that the world was run by many gods and so forth. So that total paradigm shift that Avraham brought to the world, it transformed humanity. It created Adam as his reputation, his stature, his spiritual state became higher than Adam. Why? Because Adam was placed in this incredibly high spiritual state to begin with, and then he fell. Whereas Avram, what didn't start in that space? Avram elevated himself through his own efforts to achieve that high spiritual state. And while we may think that the sending out of the Jewish of humanity from the garden is only in negative terms, we also see that there are certain positive connotations. It's not everything has its balances. And there was that song back in the 60s, got to get ourselves back to the garden. Now, I don't know what they were talking about in that one, but in our terms, in spiritual terms, what I'm trying to say is that through the efforts of connecting with Torah, Moshe was able to transform the status, Moshe through helping us with the Torah, and the Jewish people by accepting Torah and by our connection to Torah, we're able to fundamentally transform our relationship with our Creator. And we're able to start to get ourselves back to the garden. We're able to now get ourselves back to a place of real a communion with God. And this is a really important thing to say, because, one could look at that story and only see full of negatives. Only we hadn't been cast out. It's a non-starter. That wasn't the plan. Clearly, we were meant to be out here. And the process of returning to Gan Eden, the process of transforming our lives and being able to return to that kind of a connection with our Creator, we see was created with a path of Torah. And rather than be like the servant who doesn't have access to the treasures, we'll be like the son who's able to wander all of the places in the palace and see all the prized possessions of the king. Now, I see this as a beautiful analogy. This is now no longer the Sfas Emes. We're going to transition. When we leave the period of the days of awesome from Rosh Hashanah through Sukkot, we are really in this very elevated spiritual state. And one could think, maybe I'm being cast out. What do I do now? How do I connect? How do I stay on a high spiritual level now that I got to get back to life as normal? So you might have heard me tell this, but it's always bears repeating. So Rabbi Elimelech Biderman brings down that there is one of the Zmiros that we sing on Friday night, Azamer b'Shevachim. So not everybody says it's in Aramaic, but the words say it should be God's will that Tishrei should remain with your nation, with God's nation the entire year. Yehei Rava Kaima de Tishrei al Amya. In other words, that the inspiration, the blessing, the faith that we got in this month of Tishrei should last the entire year. And there was once a stolen Chassid who was by his rabbi, the Beis Aaron, for the Yom Tov. And then he went home and people said, how did Yom Tov pass? And he says, it didn't pass. It went inside of me. And when we daven on Yom Tov, we say, V'hanchilenu Hashem Elokeinu Moedei Kodshecha. God, you gave us this as inheritance, your holy days. An inheritance is something that you take with you. Inheritance is not something that you leave at the door when you walk out the shul. So now that the Yomim Tovim are over, we are left with this inheritance, which we can bring with us for the whole year. And to further emphasize that point, we say in Tehillim, in Hallel, we say, Isru Chag b'Oivsim Akanas HaMizbech. So Isru Chag b'Oivsim, it literally means, it's Tehillim 118, literally says that we should bind the holiday with ropes so it doesn't depart. Now, in Tehillim, in the second chapter, it also uses the word for ropes. But there it says that we will rip off the cords and throw off the ropes. Neither goes out. So what is that? So the Imre Emes, who was one of the rabbis of Ger, a descendant of the Sfas Emes, he says, son of the Sfas Emes, he says that these two psukim, these two sentences in Tehillim, describe two different kinds of people. There are those after Simchas Torah who say, I've been working really hard the holidays to be, on my best behavior. I've been sensitive spiritually and to others. Well, now that it's done, I can now get back to business as usual. I don't have to worry as much. I passed the test. Okay. There are others who say, no, what do you mean? I want to bind the experience of the high holidays and of Sukkot. I want to bind the Tishrei to me for the whole year so it never leaves us. Pnei Menachem, who was further descendant of the Sfas Emes, he said, it's not so easy. People try very hard, right? Most people try. They want to take that inspiration and the connection of the high holidays with them. And maybe we take on different things for the year to hold us to a higher spiritual state, whatever that, maybe you promised God, this year, God, I'm going to do this. Okay. He says, in a way, though, Yom Tov never leaves us. We leave Yom Tov. Yom Tov never leaves us. The feeling and that connectedness that we have during the Tishrei can stay with us as long as we don't walk away from it. Isru Chag b'Oivsim, binding ourselves to it, means not leaving it. Don't depart from it. What a beautiful idea. And we'll bring it together with a mashal, with a little parable. Once there was a foolish man, and they called him Matal Nar, Matal the fool. He was a fool, but he was lucky. Somebody wanted to marry Matal the fool, and he started crying on the day of his wedding. Why are you crying? He says, ever since I got engaged, everybody's been calling me Matal Chassid, Matal the Chassid, Matal the guy who's getting married. But I know in a week after the wedding, everyone's going to go back and call me Matal Nar. Everyone's going to call me Matal the fool again. So the Rabbi Hirsch of Zidichov, who told this, he said like this. He says, in Tishrei, we became wiser. We did tshuva. We returned to Hashem. But it could happen that we return to our old foolish ways. So we have to exert effort to remain with the inspiration growth of the Yom Tovim. That's a long Torah that I gave over today. Two important parts. One, to re-examine what is going on when Adam and Chava leave the Garden of Eden, and all that implies for us. The transition from that connectedness to then Avram and to Moshe. And ultimately to us, because we are the inheritors of the Torah, which transitioned us back to that close relationship with Hashem and our Creator. And also this important note about how do we keep the holidays with us? In other words, how do we maintain the level of spiritual connectedness which we have felt? And rather than walk away from it, right, we can keep it with us. May we be successful in those efforts. And even if for a moment or for a day or whatever you seem to be, or we feel that we're not as connected, have no fear. All it requires is to grab on once again to the Yom Tov. Grab on again. Review something in the Torah. Review something in our prayers. Commit to acts of charity, or recommit ourselves to the things that we promised we were going to do on Rosh Yom Kippur. And that recommitment will make that we will right away get back to that place where we were on the highest holy days. Everybody have an amazing Shabbos. May it be a wonderful Parsha Bereshis wherever you are, and may we merit to hear the sounds of the trumpets from Yerushalayim telling us that the redemption has arrived. All the best.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Yonah.
It is my great joy and pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
I love that idea of Bereshit, and kicking out of the garden is like leaving the womb of